and we are going to install a package into our Langstroth hive. Step 1, remove the plywood. Underneath the plywood, we have very user-friendly setup. Queen bee is under this disc, easily removed, and this is a can of syrup to feed the bees on their journey from the apiary to the customer. Very good idea to spray a light solution of sugar syrup on the bees just to get them interested in not flying. And what they do is they lick themselves off and are busy with sugar syrup, so they're not too sure what else is happening around them. Alright. Now, of course, all beekeepers should wear, if you're not experienced, gloves. Tuck your pants in and put on your veil. The veil is most important because honeybees react to CO2, and if they're going to chase an animal away, they're going to chase away an animal with nose and mouth, and that's where your CO2 marker is. So the veil protects you from the bees finding you. Now, one tap on the ground will knock the bees off the can. See this? You don't want the bees on the can. There's the queen cage, there's the syrup can, and the bees are not going to get squashed when you pull the items out. First comes the queen cage. Very slowly, and let's examine the queen. Putting the plywood back on so we don't disturb those bees yet. And we look to see if she is held her attendance. Some packages come with only the queen. This company puts attendants with her so she can be comforted in her new journey. This is an adoption. This is not the mother that originated with this package. There's a sugar plug on the silver end. Do not pull the plug out of this company's queen cage. The queen will come out too fast. That's quick release. This is slow release. Now I'm going to show you the candy plug under the silver disc. This is not a hanger. It's only to protect the sugar from being eaten away during transit. That is a pretty good plug. So what I like to do is release the pheromone by putting a small nail in the candy, not to stab the queen who's under there, but just a tiny nail hole to start the bees on their journey, which is a releasing of the queen from under this candy plug. This is going to happen in about 2 days in the dark without disturbance from the outside elements. So I'm going to put this queen cage on my place in here. And I have found this elastic band to be very useful. And I also want to make sure that the cage, if I'm not going to leave a frame out like some directions tell you to do, I'm going to put an elastic band around her. There are other ways to secure the queen cage, but this is so simple and less cumbersome than using wire or thumbtacks or other ideas. Just like that, and you put the candy plug about 1 o'clock, not too close to the top of the frame, not too far away at the bottom of the frame, but right about 2/3 up with the candy facing 1 o'clock. Now that queen should be next to another, if you're a new beekeeper, brand new foundation. I don't want the queen cage to be face into drawn comb. So this way, if I put drawn comb next to it, it'll be too tight and you would have to leave a frame out. But if you do it this way with a new frame, you can put all 10 frames back. And we can look in here and see that there's room between the comb and the queen cage for bees to visit with her and introduce themselves to her, their new adoptive mother. I like to put these in the 4th and 5th spot of the hive body. And then removing 4 frames to make a little gap so the bees won't just fall on top of the frames. They'll go down, find their queen, and be comforted being together again. 4 frames here. There's a gap. The next step is to remove the jar that is feeding them the can of syrup. Another tap, tap to get the bees so they're not being squished by the can when it comes out. And it's a grab and a pull. Sometimes there's beeswax here, so you twist it a little bit as it comes out. And as you see, the bees are on it. That goes on the ground to be used later. Do not throw that away. It doesn't hurt now to put another squirt of syrup right where they were eating syrup. Now this package, there's lots of other ways to do this, but this is the quick method, which looks aggressive, but it does get the bees back with their family quicker than any other method that I have seen. It's a shake and a tap into the gap. Right on top of the queen. You want them not to lose the scent of the queen. Do not use smoke, because smoke will disturb their own search for their own scent of pheromone. Smoke is used later when there are larvae present, but not in a package. Now there's quite a lot of bees clinging to the screen, and you don't want to leave them in there, especially if it's cold or rainy. So I tap it again on the ground, on the corner, try to get all the bees into the corner of the cage. And you can see now it's quite a big blob ready to roll out. They almost roll out like a ball. See that? So more are rolling out because I got them in a group. And they really want to stay as a group. One more time. Get them moving and rolling out. And that's pretty good. I'd say it's about a 90% of the bees have now been knocked out of the cage. They're looking around to see where they're supposed to go because they're not used to this foam yet. But they are going to find their pheromone scent and be in there shortly. About 15 to 20 minutes. But don't put this any place too far away. I want them to smell where they're going. So right there is a good spot. Now, a big mistake, if you don't see the rest of this story, is to leave that open. They will build a huge chunk of wax in here, and you will never be able to put the frames back in 1 week. I'm putting the frames back now. If you're a new beekeeper, these will all be unfinished. An old experience older hive that needs replacing of the bees, we'll have drawn comb. Either way, the method is the same. It's called very slowly, not pinching any of the bees, and very carefully. I teach a method of do the left side first. Don't put both sides on at once. Left side touches the wood first, and then you can come and do the right side and touch the wood. Sliding very slowly, and all the frames will go back, carefully touching each other, like that, and like that, and now the very last one will fit in the end. If each one's touching, and be careful not to pinch anybody, because that sets off a signal that something's wrong. It's called a fear pheromone and kind of smells like bananas. So the bees don't want to have fear on anything you're doing. So very carefully put the frames back. All 10. The last one is a little tricky. If it's new, it will be easier. When it's older, it's more sticky. But they will fit because this is meant for 10 frames. Pushing roots down. That looks pretty good. Queen is here with the elastic. All the 10 frames are in. Now the inner cover is placed on. You're starting with a new package. One deep box is recommended, not two at this point. What I do is I use a second box to house a feeder, because in New England, outside feeding is usually too cold and the bees have trouble finding it on the outside of the door. Easier for the bees to find the feeder right inside. Now, it's important to feed packaged bees because they are young. There's two kinds of personalities in the beehive. It's called the house bee, which are the youngest bees in the colony, and the field bees, which are the older bees of the colony. And it's kind of interesting that bees live about, let's say, 65, 80 days, like a day in their life is a year in our life. So anyone in here that's one, like let's say 10 or 15 years old, elementary school to teenagers, they are in the house and they are doing chores, making wax, feeding young larvae, creating attendance for the queen, taking out any kind of debris, guarding the hive, about like an army age, like 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, they guard the hive. Isn't that interesting? They become army bees. And after that, they become adults that bring supplies back to the hive. The supplies are pollen for the protein of the hive and nectar for the carbohydrate of the hive. Larva grows with a high bee bread diet. Bee bread is a mixture of pollen and nectar, just like if you were making bread yourself. So that is the growth stage of the bee, is the larva stage. If you don't feed the bees, and there are not any adult foragers in this hive because we sold you house bees, not field bees, in a package, 90% are young. You make a solution of syrup, which is 1 cup sugar, 1 cup water. And in this can, people always ask me, what do I do with that? What's in here? This is a solution, just like you made, that you do not throw away, and there's quite a bit in here. So I want this solution to go into our feeder jar. and I make a couple of holes in here. And now I can pour this syrup, which has some medication in it, so it's really not a good idea to throw it away. Pre-mixed at the apiary. And a quart jar is enough to feed the bees for, I would say, normally 4 days. I check it sometimes after 3, but I always refill it on if it's 5 days. A week is too long. They need to keep this feeder full until your bees have produced the wax and the brood for 1 month. It takes 1 month for your first family to hatch from egg, larva to pupa, 21 days. Then these bees will double from about 10,000 in a package to 20,000, and then they double and double again until at the end of the summer you want about 50 to 60,000 bees to survive a New England winter. Now, when I flip this over and there's holes in the cover, about 15 holes in this cover, it's a mason jar, everyone thinks it's going to pour out. And it's very, very amazing to see a vacuum create itself. It will drip and pour for about 10 to 15 seconds, and then the vacuum will be created, and this will just be available to the bees to kind of lick droplets off the cap, upside down. And I try to keep this jar just a little bit balanced up here. And this is a jar feeder. There are other feeders, but this is my favorite one because I can see how many quarts of syrup they're eating this way. Otherwise, if it's in a dark black feeder, I have no idea how much they have consumed. So a little stick here over the inner cover. Another stick here. You can use pencils, chopsticks, shims, something to hold the jar right above the bees where they're inside and warm when they feed. Now, here comes the vacuum. Watch this. Isn't that amazing? It stops. If you get afraid, you keep doing this, it will never stop. So some people don't dare believe in this and they keep worrying about it. One big, it will stop, and then placed, balanced on your beehive, surrounded by frames in here. And you're going to surround this, and without squishing any bees. This is a method I learned where you just carefully move the bees with a brush if you don't want to touch the bees out of the way, so they're safely out of the way before you begin what I call the closure, which is a little bit of a slow slide into place, making sure everybody's out of the way. And they will move. They really have no intention on wanting to get caught by this closing gate. And I keep looking in all the corners, the dangerous corners, and they're pretty safe at this point. There. I don't think I caught anybody. I always feel guilty when I catch a bee under the cover. Now, cover goes on, and this is going to stay like this, like I said, until you have your first set of brand new brood hatching. 21 days from when Queenie is first laying her eggs, which is as soon as she gets out of her cage through the sugar plug. Alright, here comes the outer cover. And I don't want to hurt anybody, so I tap them off and brush them off before I put the cover down. Slowly in place. Now these bees that haven't found their way into the bottom entrance are just confused right now because they haven't figured out exactly where they live. They're gathering at the door now. You can see the bees at the door are starting to fan, and you can actually feel the air of pheromone coming out the door, and they're calling this way. This is where she is, because the smell of the queen is now being blown out right here, and they'll start to smell the entrance as the place to find their family. And you can see them starting to do that now. See the fanning? That's a good sign. And now this tornado that we created has just come out of Georgia 3 days ago. So when they fly up, they're like, this ain't Kansas, like the old Wizard of Oz film, and they're not where they recognize. So they have to reprogram their radar to this new home. So they're beelining, after they circle and realize they're not in Kansas and Georgia anymore, they're going to realize they have to find a new home and a new entrance. I don't want them using this entrance. See this? This is a upper entrance that can be used in the winter, but it really is meant to be a vent hole for ventilation. And if they begin to learn to use this hole, they'll be guarding 2 places, and I want them just to guard here, about 4 feet out. That's the place where the bees don't want you really walking through. So I open the beehive from the back or the sides, but not standing in front. That's their flight path. Now I'm going to put something, no matter what, a piece of grass, a piece of tape, something in this entrance that I don't want them to use. It only takes about 4 or 5 days, and this will not be used by the bees because I'm discouraging them right now with a little piece of cloth, or you can use grass or whatever. Now this down here, if it's a cold night, you really want to also reduce the entrance. This is used in New England in the spring because the nights are cold. This is a little severe. Not many bees can get out of this tiny one, but this is a good one for keeping the cold winter, cold spring night winds from blowing in. So this is reducing this entrance to this size. Now they are forced to use that entrance. And also it's a little bit easier for the pheromone to get strong now right there, and they'll be able to find that pheromone smell a little bit quicker now. These bees won't stay in here overnight. They will find their way home. I usually put it like this in case it rains. There's a roof here. If you put it this way, the rain will go through here and soak the bees, which is not going to be survival for them. They cannot get wet. This will keep them dry overnight if it starts to rain.